We had six successful business guys who had very different talents and very different skill sets, and had decided that they wanted to make a difference.
Each of us joined the group because we had a heart for using our business skills and some of the resources we had accumulated in the business world to help those who were less fortunate than we were.
As we try to reverse engineer it and tell other people how to do it, we weren't that smart. It sort of happened, and it happened to have the right people at the right time.
So as we were brainstorming whether we would have a name for ourselves and actually needed to refer to ourselves as something, that we chose the name the Men of the Rising Tide, just with the general significance of we're trying to lift the ships of the folks that we're trying to serve.
Part of this was the guys didn't want their names used. They weren't doing this because they wanted to get noticed. And in fact, most of the time, they really, really didn't want to get noticed. They just wanted to do this because it was the right thing to do.
Rising Tide is a program that helps young adults who are leaving the foster care system have a stable, secure place to either get a job, go to school, but to be able to transition successfully into adulthood.
Well, as I look back on how the Rising Tide came about, it originated with John Pence going to what I believe was a FaithWorks conference in Boston, sponsored by Bob Buford's organization, where the thesis was that he was promoting the idea that groups of business people would come together around social entrepreneurs and make a 3 to 5 year commitment to provide both funding and management and oversight, advice and counsel that would enable social entrepreneurs to actually build social service organizations and ministries without, for the first few years, having the burden of doing the fundraising themselves.
He was inspired enough by that conference to come back and begin to hound his friends to get together as a giving group and choose something to do together. When we started this, John Pence was the one who kind of hounded these guys to get something going. And when it came to doing the housing deal, Rod Emory brought his talents to bear. Dick Gochnauer, who was a corporate president of Golden State Foods at that time, has this calming, kind of wise, thoughtful, humble presence, but he's a leader, and so he created just this environment where it helped us make the transition. Mitch Vance is a venture capital guy, and in the middle of the deal that looked crazy, he just asked the right questions and said, okay, I'm still in. Jim Edwards was just a humble servant in the midst of the whole thing. He deeply cared about these kids. And then Dennis Sweeney really did the heavy lifting of helping transition the program from scrappy startup to a program that has demonstrable excellence, measured success, and Dennis's commitment over the long haul has been tremendous.
Frank joined the group a couple of years later, and Frank also has a tremendous background and expertise in real estate and in financial matters, having been president of Fieldstone Homes. Greg has done a lot of work in various types of multifamily housing in the past, and has a deep level of experience with very complicated real estate transactions and making those kinds of transactions happen.
Glenn Parrish without Glenn, this never would have happened. He brought the idea to the Men of the Rising Tide, and he understood us so well, and he knew our work, and he trusted us and believed in us, and so he took that to the Men of the Rising Tide and actually convinced them to consider us as a potential project.
And Orangewood Children's Foundation came across our radar as players who were trying to actually do something in this space, but had had difficulty tackling the housing issue. Rod Emory, in the middle of that, said, why don't we do a tax-exempt bond finance real estate deal? And in a mind-numbing fashion described the deal to us, and we all said, great, sounds great, Rod, And so we began to, with Mariners Church and Orangewood, craft what a program might look like.
One of our concerns from the beginning was, if we're going to do this as a partnership, partnerships typically introduce tensions and challenges and differences in point of view. And John Hagestad, as well as Gene Howard, the executive director, in the way they worked with us, they gave us great comfort that this would be a very productive partnership that would work well. It was one that was well worth entering into.
And it was about 2 months into that Rod came back to the group and said, I made an offer on an apartment complex, are you guys ready to go? At that point, those 6 guys gave Rod $500,000 as a down payment on the deal. They just gave checks to Rod, no written documents, and we were off and running. I think that was the strength of letting business people use their business skills. They were able to bring value and do a deal that neither the church nor the nonprofit could have ever touched because of the risk inherent in it.
Probably took us 3 or 4 months to come up with the ultimate model that we implemented, and then I think it was within 6 months after that the men contributed the capital and that we made the purchase of the first building, and then launched the program and took our first residents, I think, within a couple of months after that. You know, for something of this scale and complexity, it really was not that long from inception to actually having an active program in place. The second building, which was the Orange Tree building at Garden Grove, was just absolutely perfect from our perspective. And yet we hadn't had the opportunity to harvest the capital from the first building yet. And so the Samueli Foundation, through the good offices of Orangewood, stepped up and provided all of the capital for the purchase of the second building. So the reason we have the capacity we have today is because of their generosity.
Before I came into Rising Tide, I was in the streets. Rising Tide gave me a home. Before Rising Tide, I didn't have anywhere I could safely call home.
Kids who leave the foster care system have the toughest transition of anybody that I know because they don't have family available to really be a backup system for them, so they really become totally on their own. And one of the huge issues that they face when they're leaving is where they're going to live. Literally about 40% of them become homeless within the first year of leaving the foster care system.
Rising Tide is a safety net for these kids. It's a family. You know, it's a place where they can go, and as the kids put it, I can breathe.
I knew where I was going to take a shower that night. I knew where I was going to eat that night. I knew where I was going to sleep that night. And, you know, and that was just a giant weight off my shoulders. And, you know, and Rising Tide, they help, they do that for you.
There is shelter there, and but there are also rules, and there's support there that will help them become better adults.
One thing that they stress about is saving money. It was tough because I had horrible spending habits before I joined the Rising Tide program, and at first it feels a little like you don't have too much privacy because you're always, you know, writing down on paper how much money you have and what you're spending into this and that. But I mean, if you go by that, it's just they're just trying to teach you to be responsible with your money and, you know, the stuff that you get.
Everything is about the youth. So if we need to tweak the program or we need to change the program in a large way, we'll do that. A few years ago, we started a mom-baby program. As a consumer, I couldn't find a place to put mom babies. And Orange would open their arms, and Rising Tide started it.
So having Rising Tide accept moms and babies it's a big achievement because it saved my life and my kids.
You're breaking 2 cycles. You're breaking the cycle of abuse and all the dysfunction with the mom, and some of the children will never even experience that. And it's only because they're at Rising Tide, because they would experience all of that if they were out with their moms. So it's just amazing.
Originally, the Mariners Church was very, very strongly involved in bringing in concern not only for their physical well-being but also their spiritual, and so they were involved in the early days of Rising Tide. But since that time, Young Life has been a critical component to work with the young people, and it continues to stay involved with them. Orangewood Pals is very important and do a lot of things with the young people that are in there. And now we have a group that's been there with us for a few years and do an unbelievable job with furnishing the apartments called Furnishing Hope. All of those are just a handful, but a big part of making the program work over there.
Since it started and we heard about it, it was something that I personally wanted to be involved with and thought maybe we, as kind of this Young Life organization, can walk with them and help just offer another support system. One story I'll never forget is a gal walked in and we were sat down and had a traditional, typical Thanksgiving meal set up for them, and nothing out of the ordinary it seemed, but they walked in and one young gal looked at me and her eyes were pretty full of tears and she said, "I didn't know this was for real. I didn't know people actually celebrated like this. I thought it was just on TV." And I said, "What did you used to do for Thanksgiving?" And she said, "We'd order pizza." So it was just things like that, the things that maybe we take for granted that are typical or normal have never been typical or normal in maybe the lives of these young people.
Rising Tide helped me break the cycle for me, not only for myself, but for my children as well. They're never going to go through it. I've done more this past year at Rising Tide than I had the last 5 years of my life. And I'm still thriving for more.
I just want to give a lot of thanks to the gentleman who, I guess came up with the idea of the Rising Tide program. Geniuses is all I could say. Programs really helped me out a lot, and it's not just me that it's helping out, it's a lot of other people as well.
To all the men at Rising Tide, from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you so much. You've made such a difference, not only to the children and the youth that are coming out of the system, but to people like myself, because I want to give back, and to have this opportunity for me and all the people that have worked there to be able to have this wonderful program and to be able to affect their lives is just amazing. So thank you so much. I wish I could meet all of you, and maybe I will, and I'd like to say thank you in person.
On behalf of 234 young people who have gone through Rising Tide, thank you for being there. Thank you for creating the program, and thank you for staying with the program as the program has evolved to help the kids.
On behalf of me and my children, I want to thank you for giving us a future.